Now, a couple of other extraordinary things the next Attorney General inherits. The aftermath of this oil spill. Now, I've flown over the oil spill with the Attorney General. I've seen it firsthand. I've met with small business owners. I see how they're hurting in the Panhandle. I've met with emergency operation personnel in the Panhandle. We've got a lot of work to do. Now, what BP is going to try to do is real simple. They're going to try to write a bunch of checks real quick, cut and run, and say we did everything we could. We can't let that happen. This is going to be lengthy and complicated civil litigation. And it's going to take somebody that understands civil law, not criminal law, to hold their feet to the fire. And I've done that many, many times over the 20 years I've been licensed to practice. As an attorney, I was AV rated. It's the highest rating you can get, not from yourself. You can't buy it. It's a rating you get from the judges and the other attorneys. And I've worked with some of the best law firms in the state of Florida. I've handled trials. I've handled appeals at both the state and the federal level. And I've taken on the federal government in trial and federal appellate court. And I've won. And they're arrogant. It probably doesn't surprise you. You're seeing a great deal of arrogance right now. But we're going to hold their feet to the fire too. Because they're dead wrong. We're going to win this lawsuit. Now, another thing the next Attorney General inherits, I believe, the EPA wants to impose a water quality standard on Florida that will require us to more than double our property taxes. And by the way, the only one to impose it on us, nobody else. I think that's a violation of the Constitution to impose a burden on the taxpayers of Florida and nobody else, and I will challenge him if I have the privilege to be your Attorney General. A couple of other issues. You heard about Arizona. Anybody that's critical of Arizona does not understand what they're faced with. They have a violent drug war spilling across their borders. Innocent citizens being murdered. Innocent law enforcement being killed. People afraid to walk out in their own yard. And all they said to the federal government is, do your job. The federal government refused to do it. Listen, Governor Brewer, who's a friend of mine, I served with her when she was a lieutenant governor, Secretary of State, and we worked together. What's she supposed to do? She took an oath. She took an oath. She has to protect her citizens. So if the federal government's not going to do their job, they have to do it. And how arrogant is the federal government? They sued Arizona. It's remarkable. We cannot allow this to continue. Here's what I would do as your Attorney General, because we're fortunate we don't have a violent drug war spilling across our borders. But you as taxpayers are paying millions of dollars every year for spaces in our jails, in our prisons, in our emergency rooms by people that are here illegally, often having broken the law again and hurt our citizens. So if I'm your Attorney General, I will sue the federal government to get your money back. If they're not going to secure the border, they should at least pay for their failure to do so. Now there's another issue I've been working on, overseeing the Office of Drug Control, and this is ground zero. And your sheriff is doing a remarkable job. Pill mills. 7 people die a day in Florida from the overdose of prescription drugs. That's more than all illegal drugs combined. This is an epidemic that cannot be allowed to stand. And I will work with the local sheriffs, and I will work with the Department of Health, and we will squeeze these guys out of business both from the law enforcement side and the regulatory side. Just to give you an example of what the deputies here have told me. They've seen these guys have a waiting room with 75 people, armed guard at the door, cash-only business, and at the end of the day, they're taking out hefty trash bags with $200,000 and $300,000 a day. Now that kind of crime breeds more crime. We can't allow it to happen in Broward or anywhere else in Florida, and I pledge to drive them out of the state of Florida if I'm Attorney General. You've heard talk of gangs. Gangs have become the organized crime of our time. And it's bad enough that they have victims and they ruin their life and they harm them, but now they're recruiting 12-year-olds. And they're destroying the life of these young kids they're recruiting. We can't allow that to happen. We have 7 regional task force through the Attorney General's office, and we've got to continue that work. It's critical for the future of Florida that we send a clear message around the country. We will not tolerate gang activity. We will work hard to make sure we drive them out of Florida and keep this the safest state in the country. And finally, let me mention cybercrime, because we know our Attorney General's done a wonderful job to protect our children from online predators. This has to be a continual priority. It's not only online predators, it's identity theft. It's online scam artists who are robbing our senior citizens of their life savings. And we can stop this. We're going to have to get some cutting-edge technology to do it, but we can do it. And you heard her mention Medicaid fraud. We're losing somewhere between $1 to $3 billion a year in Medicaid fraud. That's your money. That is your money. We've got to pursue these guys with all of our might. And if there's Medicare fraud, guess what? There's Medicaid fraud. There's no reason we should not have a presumption in the law. If somebody is found guilty of Medicare fraud, there should be an investigation for Medicaid fraud immediately. A couple of things I want to close with. I'm real proud to be supported by Clay Shaw. What a great public servant, and I'm proud to have his endorsement. I'm proud to be endorsed by Sheriff Lamberti and 21 of our 28 sheriffs in Florida, because I've developed a working relationship with them. And as I said opening, these are important times. Really important times. This is no time for experiments in government or on-the-job training. Whoever your Attorney General is better be able to go day one to sit on the cabinet and to serve you in all of these important issues. I've spent my life preparing for this. When I look at my life experience, my professional experience as an attorney, my public service career, it's prepared me for this moment. And I know that I'm ready for the job. In 1964, Ronald Reagan gave a speech called A Time for Choosing. And the country faced a very clear path, one way or the other in 1964. We could go down the path of liberalism, big government, more programs, higher taxes, less freedom, or the conservative path, truer to the Constitution. And the country chose the wrong path. And we're still paying for that today. But as you sit in this room at this moment, this is our generation's time for choosing. And the choices that we make in the next 2 election cycles will determine the fate of this country for the next 50 to 100 years, if not forever. The stakes are really that high. This is the cycle where if you've got a neighbor right across the street and you happen to come home at about the same time from work and you politely wave to each other a couple times a week, you've got to go across the street this time. You've got to tell them why you're voting Republican. You've got to tell them the stakes are so high for the future of our children and our grandchildren. Tell them what's in your heart. Why do you believe these principles as a Republican with everything in your body? They need to know that. They need to see your passion and understand how important this is. Well, let me just close with 2 things. Often you will hear a candidate get up and say, if you vote for me, I'll fight for the average American, the regular guy. Ordinary American. And I will never say that. It may surprise you. Here's why. I don't believe that the guy that shows up at the end of your driveway the same day every week to pick up your trash, the guy that works 12 hours a day, who goes home at the end of the day and he's covered in dirt and sweat and he's probably smelly, but as he starts up the driveway, his 2 kids come running up to him in the driveway yelling, "Daddy, Daddy." That guy that's paying his taxes and taking care of his family, he's not average. He's not ordinary. He's not regular. He's extraordinary. The woman that gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning and puts on her scrubs, and she goes to the hospital, and if you know a nurse or you've been a nurse, on your feet all day trying to help people. And when she goes home, she's got blood on her and who knows what else. And maybe she stops at the Circle K on the way home, and she gets a couple of Slurpees for her children. And when they hear the doorknob turn for her coming in the house, and they yell at the door saying, "Mommy, Mommy," they don't look at her as average, as ordinary. She's extraordinary. When my dad gets up at 4:30 in the morning to drive his dump truck, he's not average either. He's my hero. He taught me work ethic. And if we want to turn this country around, if we want to turn the economy around, make this the freest, greatest nation for the next generation, we only have to do one thing. Turn it over to the American. There are no average Americans. We are an extraordinary people. And if we turn this country back over to the talents, the energy, the spirit, and the passion of Americans, we will continue to be the freest, greatest nation on earth. I'm Gov Kottkamp. I'm running for Attorney General. I would be honored to have your vote. Thank you for having me. God bless each and every one of you. God bless.